Okay, there we are. Okay, well, welcome you guys. Welcome to another Canadian Sports Centre Atlantic podium session. I'm excited for tonight for a couple of reasons. One, we have an awesome speaker joining us who is local and has had a very exciting year. So that's exciting for me to hear from. And two, this is the first of our fall series that we're calling the Olympic series. So as everyone knows, we've come out of Tokyo. Everyone is now home, and we have set up over the next couple months, we've set up some nice talks like this where we get to hear from the coaches from the Atlantic region who were over in Tokyo about their experiences. And this is something we haven't quite done before in this format. So that's why I'm so excited. So for those I don't know, my name is Natasha Johnson. I work at the Canadian Sports Centre Atlantic. I'm based in Halifax, and I work in our coaching department. So there's a small group of us in there, and I help arrange these podium performances along with our Atlantic partners. So big thank you to Coach New Brunswick, Coach BEI, and Coach Newfoundland. We all share and rotate around. So this one's our turn. A little bit of logistics for tonight. So it is recorded. We can share that after with you. I will ask again for those just hopping on to change your name to your full name in the locker. You will get locker credit after the session. It normally takes me at least a few days to get that into the locker, but you will get credit. I'll ask that you stay muted for the duration of the session unless you're ready to ask a question, and in which case, of course, you can unmute. And any questions as we go. So Mark is going to tell us his story as he goes. If you have questions, if you could throw them in the chat, and that way I will speak up for you and sort of catch a moment where we have a break in the story and do it then. Or if you really want to unmute, if it's a longer question, just put that in the chat and we'll figure that out. Sounds good? Okay, we're going to get rolling then. So again, I'm excited, like I said, to have Mark joining us tonight. So hopefully many of you recognize the name, but Mark Smith has been a coach in the Atlantic region for a very long time. He is currently the director of the sport development team at Sport Nova Scotia and has been between Sport Nova Scotia and Canadian Sports Centre Atlantic, again, for a long time. We don't need to add years. Just know that Mark has extensive experience in sport within Nova Scotia. His background himself, he goes back as a player within softball, was on the men's national team again for many years and had a very, very, very successful career there, and then transferred over to coaching and has coached every team that Softball Canada has. So he's coached both the men's and women's side at the national level. He's coached Canada Games. So he's even coached our Team Nova Scotia here at the Canada Games, and now has just returned back from coaching the team at the Olympic Games in Tokyo, which is what we're going to hear about. Mark has a long list of accolades, including being CAC's Coach of the Year one year, as well as a couple other big awards. And as a player, again, had many, many experiences, Pan Am medals, World Championship medals, and so on. So I do encourage you, if you want the long list of Mark's accomplishments, he's in our Nova Scotia Sport Hall of Fame, or you can Google his name and find his full bio on Softball Canada's site. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
Hi, Natasha. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's fun to be here. Many years ago, I sat in Natasha's chair and was responsible to help deliver these podium presentations to coaches across the Atlantic. And it's always great to see coaches taking time to learn more and just generally enhance their own professional development. So I'm glad to be able to be here as a fellow Nova Scotian and Maritimer to share a little of my experience. Natasha asked me tonight to talk a little bit about our Olympic experience, which I'm happy to do. And I felt that the best way to do this, given that we're virtual and not in person, was to kind of narrate some pictures. So I'm going to show you some images. I'm going to show you a little video here in a few seconds just to kind of warm things up and introduce you to the team. But then I'm going to kind of walk you through our journey to Tokyo, because while the last 4.5 months are really what people focus on from mid-March really through the end of the Olympic Games, the truth is the journey for us started 12 years ago with a lot of ups and downs on the road to getting to this place. And I think from a coaching perspective, those of you that are on the call, or all of you are on the call that coach, there's going to be peaks and there's going to be valleys. And it's just important to understand that at the end of the day, you want to arrive at that place, hopefully, where you've grown, the athletes have grown, and it's been a positive experience, but it is not a linear progression. And I think it's important to understand that there will be moments when you're absolutely over the moon with success, but there's also going to be moments when you're going to wonder why you continue to do it. And that's part of what drives us to be good coaches. So away we'll go.
Is that coming up for you, Mark? It's not coming up on our end.
Yeah, I have it. You don't see it?
No, you could share it in the chat, maybe the link for me. Yeah, it's not. Oh, it
Okay.
might be because of the screen you're sharing.
Okay, let me stop here.
Yeah, I would stop share and bring up the video screen.
Okay.
Yeah, it's sharing your PowerPoint.
Let me. Okay. And now let me try. I'm a bit of a rookie at this here. Let me.
That's all right. We've all learned so much this year.
How's this?
Just giving it a sec. Nope, nothing
Nothing?
yet. Nope.
Nothing? Okay. Well, I'm not going to spend all day trying to do this. It was simply to show a little bit of the video surrounding the bronze medal game. But
if you want to copy and paste the link in the chat, I might be able to bring it up. If you can do that quickly.
And I don't know if I can, and I don't really want to feed this up. Natasha.
You've got good photos, so let's go with that.
Yeah,
then.
So we'll go with the images.
Hopefully, a lot of you online watched it like I did. It was really exciting.
Okay, so we'll go back to here.
There we are. Okay. You're back to your Dropbox screen.
All right.
Here.
So now I just have to get to the. There we go.
Yeah.
Bingo. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is an image of just after the last out was made against Mexico, and clearly a lot of excitement, and that's pretty much the entire team that you're seeing in the middle of the diamond. And one of the things that became really symbolic of our team over the course of the last couple of years, but especially this past summer, was the very much a self-directed group. So as a coaching staff, what we ended up doing more and more was sort of stepping back and letting them own their preparation, own the tough conversations that sometimes needed to be had between teammates. And after each game, we made it a point of staying off the field and allowing them to come to the middle of the diamond and celebrate themselves before we sort of entered their circle. So this was a really neat moment, and it represents a lot of years of hard work and great memory for sure. But it didn't all start like that. And I think this is sort of the piece that I think is really important for coaches to understand as you evolve through your coaching journey. In 2009, when I became the head coach of the women's national team, it was following the 2008 Olympic Games when Canada had finished fourth and were beaten in the bronze medal game by Australia. And the 4-year cycle that led to that Olympic Games was marred with infighting. There was a bit of a changing of the guard, in that you had a very young group of athletes that were now coming into work with an older group of athletes, very different coaching philosophies from the previous regime in 2004 to the new regime that took over in 2005. And the long and the short of it is that over those 4 years leading to Beijing, you had a huge divide that existed within the team. And so I created a poster series because I felt that every couple of years it was important for the athletes to get to see visually what our progress looked like. And so there's 4 posters. You're looking at 2 of them now. And the first one I'm showing you, the absence of leadership, was how I would have depicted the group that we inherited. The water print pictures in the back are of 3 players that ended up playing on the team until 2012. They were 3 of the leaders from the previous regime. And this is right after the bronze medal game in 2008, after they lost to Australia. And when we inherited the group, the things that we saw was that there was an absolute fear of failure, because you had older versus younger, and the older were constantly looking down their noses at the younger and not playing big sister and not bringing them along and supporting them, but rather judging them. There was very much a me first attitude, and that players were all about getting their athlete assistance funding and making sure they could do whatever they needed to do to look as though they were performing to the level they needed to be, but they really didn't care how the team performed as long as they performed well. There were definitely some egos, and primarily it was the older players, but there were a few younger ones that had egos that they hadn't quite earned yet. There was a lot of personal agenda, a lot of cliques within the team, and an absolute sense of entitlement. Some of them had been on the team for 7-8 years at that point and felt that they were going to be on the national team for as long as they wanted to be. And then the 2 little badges that you see down to the left are identifying a couple of things that had happened in that period of time that hadn't previously existed. So the idea of celebrating some of the successes we were having, despite the fact that this was absolutely a transitional period, and we had as much negative, if you will, taking place as we did positive, but we felt it was important to identify. So in 2010, for the first time in the history of the program, we finished on the podium at the World Championships. So they won the first ever bronze medal at a World Championship event with the women in the history of the women's national team. And we named a 16-year-old to play on our team in 2009, which was unheard of, that eventually became one of our captains and a key part of our team over the last few years. So those were the two highlights. Between 2013 and 2015, we were becoming better. Some of the veterans had moved on. We had some younger players come into the program that were still learning how to compete at the international level and what it took to be an international level player. But we definitely had a group that were starting to learn more and appreciate more of what it took to play at an advanced level. And so I defined it very much as us finding our way. And you started to see a sense of sisterhood, meaning they were starting to be more of a team. They were starting to be more invested in one another and recognizing that for the team to do well, the individual had to do well. I use the word love because it's interesting. In the last couple of years, when players describe our team and they describe how part of the culture of our team, love is probably the word that's the most dominant word, that they genuinely loved one another and were there for one another, and the staff equally invested in that. We started to see players take a little more freedom in terms of not being afraid to fail, understanding that as an athlete, you have to take some risk, and there's going to be times when you'll succeed, but also times when you'll fail. And we started to see some of that. The mentality of our women's national team when I inherited the program was very much of prey versus predator, very much afraid to lose as opposed to trying to win. And so we very much as a coaching staff were trying to reinforce this, hunt or be hunted mentality. And when we played teams, especially competition that we were superior to, we needed to have a predator mentality. And we started to see team chemistry come together. And then we ended up devising a model called Fear the Leaf that I'll talk about a little bit later. And then the badges again represent, some of the positive. We won the Pan Am gold medal in 2015 in Toronto at the Pan Am Games, first time since 1983, which was the first year of women's softball in the Pan Ams that we'd won a gold medal. We wound up on the WBSC podium in 2016 again. And we also, had a young pitcher in Sarah Groenwagen lead us to a Pan Am gold medal, who was a year out of university at the NCAA level. So certainly things were starting to turn in our favor, and we were starting to see the program grow and evolve towards the program it eventually proved itself to be a few months ago. The 2016 to 2018 was about learning how to play with purpose. It was about becoming a team, as in we versus me. There was a trust that had developed among the players. They were starting to own their own performances, own the expectations of the team. The sense of belief, self-belief, and team belief had heightened. We were going into international events now, believing we could beat the best teams, believing we deserved to be on the podium, as opposed to hoping that would happen. We very much were developing or adopting a growth mindset. So it was about how do we continue to get better, as opposed to worrying about the things we didn't do quite as well as we would have liked. And we talked about an identity as a team. How do we want to be looked upon by the teams that we play against? And then again, the badges that represent the 5 things that were highlights over that period of time. And then the last 2 to 3 years, the all-in mentality, which is very much the team that we just finished playing with a few months ago. There was a resilience that this group had developed, which was an Achilles heel for us, to be frank, up until probably around 2019. There was a sense of investment, with people investing in their own preparation, but also the team's best interests. Players were playing and wearing the jersey and the maple leaf with honor. The trust had continued to grow. Our ability to compete was there we use the word relentless in terms of constantly striving to be better, not only against the teams we felt that we were superior to, but against the United States and Japan, whom we were chasing. There was a sense of gratitude that I think was born out of just maturity, and these women growing from young women into older women, and recognizing how fortunate we are to wear the maple leaf, represent our country, and have an opportunity to play for Canada. And then the just us mentality, which was very much, I think, very much cemented over the COVID period, when we went from a camp in Nova Scotia in March of 2020 to not actually seeing one another until January of 2021, and the things we needed to do to keep the team together and feeling as like a cohesive unit over that period of time. we talked about creating an identity. And one of the things we talked about and spent a lot of time with our mental performance coach was in identifying what were those key things that we needed to be able to actually articulate around what makes a great team and what allows us to know who we are. And so the 23 things that you see here on the left-hand side, this was cultivated over about 6 weeks of summer where we met for an hour and a half a week to start to talk about what was the Canadian identity and how do we want to be remembered? What's our legacy to the game? What's our legacy to the community? What's the legacy that we want to leave for the kids that come behind the ones we have in terms of wearing the maple leaf? And on the other side, just before we went into the Olympic qualifier in 2019, the Fear of the Leaf poster was very much about every player and coach identifying a slogan or a tagline that they felt depicted how they felt about our team and the way we needed to perform to be successful. So these things, I want to really strive. This wasn't developed overnight. It took us probably 2 years to come up with this and to continue to refine it and refine it and refine it until it actually represented who we were. And we could look at each of those we's and we could see in our behavior and in our attitude and in our culture that we were living these things. And then on the right-hand side, all of us had a slogan around the things that we believed would make us successful. And we simply put this on a poster. The Fear of the Leaf poster was in the dugout so that players could come in off the field and have that reinforced every game. And that's kind of how we rolled in 2019. This picture was taken moments after we qualified in Tokyo. And really the things that I've said beforehand, this picture probably should have been a few slides ahead, but you're seeing the results of a team that had just spent a full summer together playing in the professional league in the United States, having been together for about a 2.5 to 3 month period. And it ended in us qualifying for the Olympics. And the qualifying for the Olympics was interesting because it happened because there were 2 berths for Canada and we lost a game to Mexico, a 2-1 game on national television that would have clinched, and the next day we clinched. So while we were excited about the opportunity to have earned the right to go to Tokyo, we were disappointed because in our mind we snuck in the back door. We didn't win it outrightly the way we should have. We knew we were a better team than Mexico, but when the moment was upon us, it was too big for us. We didn't handle it well. So we were going, but we certainly weren't satisfied with how we got there. I can stop there. And this was taken moments after that picture. And this is sort of what this represents. It was a bittersweet moment to know you'd achieved it, but we knew that we had underachieved and how we got there. I can stop there, Natasha, for a moment if there's any questions.
Yeah, there's none so far, Mark. So I think just keep on rolling. It's good.
All right. This is the Canadian Sports Centre Atlantic, and we spent a fair bit of time over the 4 years of the cycle from 2017 through 2021. But we brought the team to Halifax in January of 2020 for a 6-week camp. And so this became home base for our team. And Scott Wilgris, who's one of the lead strength coaches at the Sports Centre, was our strength coach and had been our strength coach over the 4 years of the cycle. And Scott did just a phenomenal job with building a softball specific program for our athletes that allowed them to maximize on their softball skills, as well as be as physically fit and as physically strong as we could be. And this was one of our fitness testing days. We would run fitness testing twice a year. We had standards that athletes had to achieve. And so this was on the 2nd of March, I believe, when we were doing our testing prior to breaking camp in a week's time for what we thought was a 10-day break. And then we were going to come together and reconvene in California, but that never happened. But the center was home base and our athletes trained there 3 times a week. We also had Ellie Black, who would be no stranger to anybody on this call from our region. One of the things we were trying to do with the athletes was expose them as much as possible to people who had been where we wanted to go. And Ellie, of course, had been to Rio. And we felt to have somebody in front of the team that could actually talk about what the Olympic journey is like, what it's like when you actually get there. What are the things that you need to be mindful of? What are the things that the average person doesn't understand, but they're going to be confronted with when you actually get off the plane in Tokyo and need to deal with the bright lights and the expectation of the Olympic Games. And Ellie spent about an hour and a half with us sharing her journey, but also, generally what were some of the expectations we could have. And it was neat. We actually roomed on the same floor as Ellie in Tokyo. And as you may know, she was injured and could only compete in one of the disciplines, which was really disappointing for her. But it was so neat to be there with her just two doors down, and the athletes again able to see her and really support her through what was an extremely trying time in Tokyo, given her injury. And this is just after our fitness testing day on March the 2nd. We had 89 personal bests in fitness testing. And just to share what that meant, it meant that of the 6 or 8 exercises that we had standards to measure the athlete's performance by, there were 89 times while we competed in those 6 particular standards that athletes exceeded their personal best. I can say with absolute certainty that on March the 2nd of 2020, we had the strongest, fittest softball team in the world, bar none. The commitment that these women made to their strength and conditioning was absolutely off the charts. I mean, just to watch them transform their bodies from the fall of 2017 to the spring of 2018 to the spring of 2019 was unbelievable. They were fast, they were strong, they looked like athletes, they behaved like athletes, it increased their confidence. It was just incredible. And so this was a moment that they were proud of. Scott, as the architect of the program, had a heck of a lot to be proud of, but our fitness was absolutely one of our competitive advantages, and Scott deserves the credit for that. This was the last day in Halifax. So on the 13th of March, the team departed. Later that day, they shut the airport down. And within the next 10 days, we saw first Canada pull out of the Olympic Games due to safety around COVID. And then the Olympic Committee actually canceled the games or postponed the games. This was taken over in Eastern Passage. The team stayed at CFB Shearwater in the barracks, which was another neat experience, because if you've ever been to CFB Shearwater, the barracks are ancient. And so it very much put them in an environment that many of them were uncomfortable with. But it was all part of that resilience piece that you're going to have to suffer through not having cable TV and not having some of the luxuries of home. And they did a great job. And they went down Eastern Passage and took this picture the afternoon of the morning before they left. When COVID hit, and we all were reeling for a little bit, especially when the COC said, well, Canada's not going. The first fear, or the first thing as a coaching staff we had to deal with, was athletes calling us to say, so the Olympics are going to happen and we're not going. And of course, we know as little as they know at the time. It didn't make sense to me that the COC would pull us out of the Olympics unless they knew more than they were letting on. And very clearly within 2 days, the IOC said, we're going to postpone the games. But we knew at that point, given what had happened and the uncertainty and players just generally feeling so many things were outside of their control, we needed to come up with something that was going to keep the group connected. So we put together a virtual camp. And the idea of the virtual camp was that after giving them the 10 days off that we had agreed to when they left Halifax, we were going to bring them together once every 2 weeks, although they had homework to do on a weekly basis specific to their positional units. But once every 2 weeks, every second Monday, we did a 90-minute team virtual session around bringing them together. And so our mental performance coach, Dr. Wade Gilbert, and I basically sat down and we looked at, well, what would a virtual camp look like? So we wanted to talk about mind mastery, because we knew that the mental performance and the mental resilience piece was going to be huge, because we had athletes living all over North America. Some of them had been able to get out before COVID locked everything down and borrow gym equipment so they could train in their garages and train in their basements and maintain a fairly high level of fitness given what they were coming off of on March the 2nd with the personal bests. But then there were also some of them that didn't have much of anything. And so Scott, again, you talk about creativity. He basically visited with each athlete through Zoom and he said, what do you have at home that you can use to train? And then he helped them develop individualized programs based on where they lived and what they had access to so that they could maintain as high a level of physical fitness as possible. We then decided we needed to give them some things to read that were going to reinforce the positivity that we knew was important. We did some imagery work. We also did, in addition to this, on the off Monday nights, the pitching coach did an individual session with pitchers and catchers. I did an individual session with hitters, and the infield coach and outfield coach did individual sessions. So basically every Monday night, the group were together. 1 week it was in their own individual positional components. The other week it was a huge team come together. And that went from April the 20th until the 29th of June. And then the understanding was that as of June 30th until August 31st, you could have summer. And, given that we're a summer sport and that most of us don't know what it's like to have a summer where we aren't on the ball field, 5 to 6 days a week, it was a real treat to actually the lake or just generally do the things they never get to do because normally they're traveling around the world playing softball. And so that 2-month period was a great time for them to catch their breath a little bit, to live somewhat of a normal existence, because September 1 is when our off-season training started to ramp up as we led into 2021. And this is just an example of the reading list. I'm a big believer in forcing athletes to challenge themselves and think outside of the box and learn new things. So these are 6 books that that was required reading for the athletes. They didn't all have to read the same books. We designated books based on needs that athletes had, things we felt they needed to be better at. All of the hitters read the Heads Up Baseball, but the other ones were sort of based on personality and based on what our strength and conditioning coach felt, what our mental performance coach felt, in terms of, and our positional coaches felt. And then just the whole game plan piece, which is delivered through the COC, but it gives athletes an opportunity to delve into different things. It's a great resource usually for retiring athletes as they start to look at what's the next phase of life bring. But we tried to tap into every resource available to them so that they constantly had access to things that would challenge them and keep their minds occupied in a positive way while we couldn't be together and couldn't be on a ball field. We also, through our virtual camp, talked about the games itself. So for example, we had them scout the games. So we knew that we were going to play Mexico, our very first game, on the 22nd of July. So we had the players do a scout of Mexico. So we provided all of the video around the Mexican team, what we knew their strengths and weaknesses were, then how we would prepare to compete against Mexico. The players had to talk about that. Pitchers had to talk about how they would pitch the Mexico hitters. Our hitters had to talk about the adjustments they would make against the Mexico pitchers. And we did that for each of the teams that we needed to play against in the Olympics. So in essence, we played the Olympics a year in advance of when we were going to go and tried to model some of the same processes we would use this year, so that when we got to this year, it was just dress rehearsal. We'd already done this once. We could refine anything that we missed in the dress rehearsal from 2020 and make sure that we incorporated those changes for 2021. So the keys to keeping the athletes motivated during the summer of 2020 was the weekly activities, and talked about the fitness piece and the team Zooms, the calls with staff, the planned sessions. As a coaching staff, we needed to stay equally engaged because we were living all over the country and all over North America. So coming together ourselves, sometimes it was to talk shop, sometimes it was just to get caught up. And we even had a happy hour call on Friday afternoons where we'd get together, and the deal was you had to have a drink, and for 45 minutes to an hour, we just got caught up on life and things we were doing, our families, our kids. But it was a way for us to stay connected during, obviously, a challenging time for everybody. They got to enjoy some of the summer. And I often tell people that the extra year was an absolute difference maker for us, because from a maturity standpoint, we had a few players who were coming of age, but weren't quite there yet. And the extra year of growth and personal development certainly pushed their development over the line. We then decided, we tried to have a couple of camps starting in September of 2020. We were going to go to British Columbia, but COVID numbers started to increase, so we were forced to cancel it. We were then going to go to Ontario over the Thanksgiving weekend in October. Again, COVID canceled it. We were then going to go to Florida in December, but numbers in Florida were off the charts, so that became something we couldn't do. By this point, we hadn't been together as a team since March of 2020. And the athletes were starting to get antsy around feeling as though they were falling behind because they were all training individually, but they weren't able to train together. And we knew that we needed to get them together to continue to build a sense of team, but more importantly, for them to feel as though they were where they needed to be, they hadn't fallen behind, and that we were right on track. So we decided at the height of COVID in Ontario that we were going to have a 3-week camp. And it's funny the things that turn out as blessings in disguise, because first and foremost, during the time we had the camp was when Ontario was on a shutdown, and only national team and Olympic athletes were able to train at facilities. So quite literally, we trained in 2 facilities where we were the only people in the facility. We had an indoor bubble the size of the Soccer Nova Scotia's indoor facility to ourselves 3 days a week. We had another indoor baseball space a block away from our hotel that we could go in and do small group work. And we had the gymnasium or at the Canadian Sports Center in Scarborough where we could go in and do any type of testing, especially COVID testing. Our athletes were confined to the hotel. We couldn't leave the hotel other than to go to training. We had our meals catered, so the athletes couldn't even mingle and spend time together at the hotel. The only time they were together as a group was at training. Otherwise, they were in their rooms. They had a roommate. Each hotel had separate rooms. They had to wear a mask when they were in the room. We tested every day. We needed to do this for two reasons. One, we needed to bring them together so they could actually be a team again and feel comfortable and confident that they were moving in the right direction. We also needed to do it because I knew and our staff knew that we needed to get on the field. We needed to get outside and we needed to play softball outside. And the only place for us to be able to go was going to be the United States. And we knew that in the hot weather climates in the United States, COVID was not doing well. And there was a real fear, understandably, by our board of directors from a liability and a negligence standpoint to allow us to go to a country where COVID seemingly was being ignored. But as a staff, I knew that if we didn't get these athletes on turf or on grass and sunshine on their faces and working on the things they needed to work on, we were going to lose them emotionally. So the 3-week camp in Ontario ended up being a great example of us being able to demonstrate to our board that we could be in a COVID infested environment and we could protect ourselves and be safe. The other thing we did, which I think became a forerunner to a number of other Olympic programs, was we had a young doctor who was interning come with our team. So for the 3 weeks in Ontario, she was with us at the hotel. She handled all the testing every day. She made sure we were compliant with the COVID protocols of the day. When we went to Florida, we had that same doctor come and then another doctor come because we were in Florida for 2.5 months. So we had doctors on site the entire time. We had 7 houses that housed 4 people in a house, every person with their own room. We trained at a facility that closed itself to the public so that only we could train there. We did everything within our power to make sure that we could be safe. We did all of our grocery shopping online and we would go and pick it up, but we didn't go in the store. It was dropped off. Knock on wood, we did not have one failed COVID test in 4.5 months. People were not exposed. We were as safe as you could possibly imagine. And we did all of these things by making sure that we, basically kept the athletes as safe as we could. But it was the 3 weeks in Ontario that allowed our board to feel comfortable and confident that we could pull it off in a place like Florida where COVID was running rampant. And it really went a long ways to improve the psyche and the confidence level of our athletes that we were on track with where we needed to be. And we were going to be prepared when we got to Tokyo. This is the lobby of the hotel. The doctor asked if she could give them Starbucks because they absolutely were Starbucks fans. The doctor's the lady in the front with the glasses. So on Saturday morning, she would go into a Starbucks run, order it through the drive-through, come back. The athletes would meet her in the lobby, get their order, and then go back to their rooms. So this is, I think, maybe the first day they actually got their Starbucks. They were pretty pumped about having their coffees. This is a picture of one of our players at the indoor facility where we trained as they're kind of hammering around a little bit and having fun. And then this is Florida, where we're finally on the ground. We trained at a facility that is on the property of the Minnesota Twins spring training facility. It's a 4 softball diamond complex. We had 2 staff from the Fort Myers Sport and Recreation Authority that were assigned to work with us. Can't say enough about them. If any of you ever want to go to a destination in the US to train, whether it's softball or other sports, I could highly recommend this and put you in contact with people. But we were treated like family for the time we were there. Not only what we needed in terms of softball, but if there was anything we needed in the community, these people were our go-tos. In fact, we got every athlete and every staff person that hadn't been vaccinated, because when we left Canada, you couldn't get vaccinated. And the IOC and the COC and on the Podium had no idea how or when they were going to get athletes vaccinated. In the United States, at pharmacies and at supermarkets, vaccinations were free. And as long as you could prove that you had a proof of residence in the United States, you were eligible. So about 2 weeks into our stay, one of our players happened to find this out. And over the course of the next 3 weeks, every player on our team and staff person that wasn't vaccinated got vaccinated with 2 doses in Florida at free of charge. And we were the only national team to that point in the country that were fully vaccinated before we went to the Olympics.
Mark,
This
I'm just
is,
going to ask a quick question there around that, just to make sure we capture. So at this point, you'd been out of training camp and not on the field with these athletes for a year.
Mhm.
So looking back over that whole year for these athletes, at this point, I'm sure they were excited. I'm sure you were excited to get them through this point. Did you have any that struggled to remain focused and motivated to finally get to this March where they get to get on the field?
We did. We lost one player, quite honestly, that we ended up cutting and leaving home before we left Canada because she had struggled, really had been struggling at our camp in Halifax. Towards the end of the camp in Halifax, we just noticed a bit of a disassociation with the team and not really wanting to put in the work. And, she had struggled with some mental health issues. So we very much were in tune with that. And we did everything we could to support her. And when we ramped back up in the fall, again, very lethargic, not really motivated to do the work. There was a training group in the province she lived in that she just refused to make herself available to train with, claimed she would train on her own, showed up at camp in January, was not in the level of physical condition she needed to be, underperformed. We still gave her the benefit of the doubt and tried to work with her. But in that 6-week window between the camp in Ontario and going to Florida, things just didn't get any better. And she was becoming a distraction to the team, quite honestly, and didn't seem to have the motivation to put in the work. And our feelings were, when you've got to convince somebody that going to the Olympics is a good thing, then it's probably time for us to look in a different direction. So that's what we ended up doing, unfortunately. And she is a difference maker type player. So it's fair to say that in the 2 games that we lost in Japan, that she could have had a positive impact on the outcome of those games. But quite honestly, she wasn't in a place to be able to help us, and she was a detriment to the team and the team culture. And as a result of it, we had to make a really difficult decision.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
This is a picture of this same team in 2019. We played in a place called Marion, Illinois, in the Women's National Pro Fast Pitch League. And we played as the Canadian Wild of Southern Illinois. And so this was our team shot at our stadium. We played in a minor league baseball stadium of artificial turf. This was the closest experience that our athletes would ever have to being treated as professionals. They had their own clubhouse, they had their own locker room, they had their own shower stall. I mean, it was top notch. And these people, the 2 people on the far end, the person in front of me, Mike Pinto, and the woman on the far end, Kathy Perry, who was our GM, they could not have been more accommodating. We had an average fan base of probably around 15 to 1,700 a game. We traveled from as far north as Ohio and as far east as Florida. It was an 8-team league. It was absolutely what we needed to be prepared to qualify for the Olympics. It gave us I think a 32 game schedule in addition to the Canada Cup and some other events that we played in. And they were really instrumental in helping us prepare to qualify. And we were to go back there and play in 2020. Then, of course, things got aborted. The league ended up imploding. But we decided that because it was such a positive experience and we felt like we owed it to the community to come back, we stayed at the University of Southern Illinois in Carbondale, about 10 miles west of Marion. And the university treated us well. We stayed in campus apartments. We trained at their softball complex right across the street from our apartments. We went back there mid-May of this year, and we stayed until the latter part of June, and we played a 16-game exhibition schedule there, bringing other countries and other teams in as a thank you to them. And these people they're like a second family, and they were absolutely instrumental in our getting on the podium. And I couldn't be more grateful to them for what they did to help us prepare. This is the weight room at Southern Illinois. So no different than at the sports center. We had lifting 3 times a week. The athletes lifted in groups. Scott was there for a period of time. And then Josh Krause, who's the lead strength and conditioning coach at St. FX, was the other person that came in for 6 weeks when Scott wasn't there. But just, again, an incredibly strong, fit group of women that worked as hard in the weight room as they did on the ball field. This was a really emotional day. In the background between Jenny Gilbert, which is the number 25, and Kaylee Rafter, which has the white hat on, you see a little square on the horizon. That square is Cape Canaveral. That is where Apollo 11 in 1969 was launched. When we went to Florida at the end of June to play an exhibition series against the Florida Pride, who are the reigning Pro League champions, and they are comprised of a number of international stars from around the world and former NCAA players, it just so happened that because of other events going on in the area, we had to stay in Cape Canaveral, which is about a 25-minute drive from Melbourne, which is where we played. In Cape Canaveral, you're not very far from anything to do with Apollo. You've got the John F. Kennedy Space Center. Everything you see there has some type of a connection to Apollo. Our mental performance coach, Wade Gilbert, did a little bit of a mission, and he found the Apollo Museum. And although we couldn't get over to the launch pad, we were able to find a place where we could see it from there on the grounds of the museum. And because we had talked about our journey in Tokyo being a mission, and we had talked about we called it our moonshot, as in we've got one chance to go and win a medal. Women's softball hasn't been in since 2008. It will not be in again until possibly 2028 if it's in again. For this group of women, it was their one and only opportunity to go to an Olympics and medal at an Olympics. So when we thought about, we hadn't named the team officially and we hadn't given them their official Olympic jerseys. So it dawned on us that we had an opportunity here to do something really special. So this was a Saturday morning where we took the team over to the Apollo Museum and we did a bit of a scavenger hunt with them on the property, and they had to figure out some things. We created a bit of a game and there were some prizes associated with it. And then we walked across the street to this beach area where you see the launch area in the background. And this is where we officially gave them their jerseys. And it was a pretty emotional time because even though, there were some assumptions made, I'm sure that some of them were going to be on the team based on their history and their ability, until you're actually told you're on the team, there's always that little bit of doubt. And so to get their jerseys, to have it at a place that was certainly important to us because of what we had talked about, the mission piece, this was a pretty neat experience. And so this is them with their Olympic jerseys, which they had yet to wear, but had been awarded to them. And it was their first time that they actually could call home and tell their parents and their loved ones that they were going to Tokyo. And then the staff. And this is just an incredible group of people that gave of the time and their energies and their efforts. And I'm a firm believer that you build your staff like you build your team. You build the strengths, you fill in gaps, but most importantly, you surround yourself with motivated people who are there for the players. And I've coached on staffs where you had coaches who were there for self-serving reasons. And I've coached on staffs where the athletes are first. And this was a staff where the athletes were first. And we had a lot of fun off the field together. And everything we did was in service of the athletes we coached. And we are on the same beach where Cape Canaveral is. And that's our picture together to recognize that we had arrived and we were going to make that journey as well. And then the last thing we did before we left Florida was we played an exhibition series against NCAA All-Stars. And after that was done, this was our very last game. The next day, 2 days later, we were actually leaving to go to Tokyo. So to toast the fact that we had gotten through the pandemic, that we had played a competitive season, that we had gotten through unscathed and uninjured, we got some champagne. And on the field, after we finished that game, we toasted ourselves and we passed the champagne around, and every athlete, offered a little something about their journey and their experience. This is Jen Salling, who was one of our senior players. She played on the 2008 team and had a horrendous experience. She wound up being our best player in Tokyo and led the entire Olympic Games in hitting. And it was just sort of fitting that before we stepped on the plane to actually go to Japan, that we acknowledged the gratitude we had for getting to this point and how hard people had worked in helping us get to this place. This is arrival in Tokyo after 18 hours of flying. When you land, you then had another 2.5 to 3 hours of COVID testing and COVID screening and things you had to go through. So we were probably the sport that took the least amount of time because you had to go online and actually register through some apps, and most teams didn't do it. And there were some horror stories of teams being stranded at the airport for 6.5, 7 hours. But we landed at 3:15 in the afternoon and we were on the bus leaving at 5:45. So we were pretty pleased with the amount of time it took us to get in and get out of there. Not to mention that we had to get on a bus and drive another 5 hours to the city that we were going to train in for 2 weeks. And this is directly outside the airport. So it was sort of, we've arrived, there are the Olympic rings. And before we get on the bus for our 5-hour drive, we were hamming it up a little bit and took another picture. When we got to Anjo City, which is where we trained, this is what we were greeted with. And I can't say enough about the people of Japan and the hospitality and the humility and the way we were made to feel. Our athletes felt like rock stars. They were treated like rock stars. The softball facilities were maintained perfectly. The building you see behind was an indoor fitness center that they actually took a large room. They bought all brand new equipment to Scott's specifications. They put it in this room, and the only people that trained in that room for the 2 weeks we were there was us. When we came in, they unlocked the door. When we left, they locked the door. And when it was done, then they took the equipment and they repurposed it. But you talk about people who wanted to make sure that we had everything we could possibly have. These banners you see are pictures of every player with their number and their name on them. And that was hanging in the stadium when we would go into play. And we played six games against the professional teams in Japan. And these banners were hung around the stadium to the extent that you would think that we were the home team when we were actually, thousands of miles away from home, and we were not the home team. So again, made to feel extremely comfortable and welcomed in that environment. This is the weight room I'm telling you about that they set aside with Scott hamming it up with the girls again. This is Scott and our mental performance coach, Wade Gilbert, having a little bit of fun. We were given these kimonos as part of some of the gifts we were given. And we couldn't leave our hotel rooms. And when I tell you that different than hotels in Canada, where you've got lobbies and you've got meeting spaces, in Japan, when you go to a hotel, there are hotel rooms and that's it. And the hotel rooms are probably, no exaggeration, 12 feet long and 12 feet wide. And in that you have a bed, a desk, and a washroom. So you saw adults spending a lot of time hanging around the hallways because that was our entertainment. So these two decided to get dressed up in the kimonos we had, and then somebody took a picture of them. So they were hamming it up and having a little fun because they were bored to death. One of the books that I showed was Legacy. And Legacy is a book written by James Kerr that chronicles how the New Zealand All Blacks developed into considered to be the premier model of how you build a successful sport franchise. And the very first chapter in the book talks about sweeping the sheds. And what sweeping the sheds mean is your veteran players lead by example, and they do the things for themselves rather than expecting others to do. Our team, we used that book from 2016 as a blueprint. And so, for example, in Japan, when teams are finished using the facilities, the players rake the field, the players clean the dugout. There is no person that comes along and empties the trash. You do it for yourself. And I'm pleased to say that our players, without having to be prompted, did exactly those things. So here's a picture of two of our players who, after a practice, got out the dustpan, got out the broom, made sure the dugout was left exactly as it was found when we arrived. Other players were out on the field with the rakes, filling in the potholes, making sure the fields were raked. I was really proud of them for that, because in North America, this is not part of our culture and how we would do things. But our players adapted very quickly and took ownership of doing these things, to the point where the Japanese were annoyed that we were doing it, because they expected that they would get to do it for us and we wouldn't allow that to happen. This is the night that the last cut had to go home the next day. We took one alternate with us to Japan to make sure that if we ran into any type of an injury leading up to the Olympics, we didn't have to fly our player over, deal with the jet lag, who hadn't been training for 2.5 weeks. So we took the player with us. The risk you take with that is that they know they're going home and their teammates know they're going home. And it's always going to be difficult when you get to that moment. We had a little team session the night before we left to go up to the Olympic Village. We had the parents do a testimonial video that we showed the athletes that was highly emotional. And at the end of it, we had this player's parents speak last, how proud they were of her, of course, despite the fact they knew she was an alternate. And so when she got up to thank the team for making her feel so a part of things and so much appreciated the journey, it became extremely emotional. And almost on cue, one player went up to give her a hug, two players went up to give her a hug, and the entire team got out of their seats. And so this is an example of our team in terms of all of them in tears, because this one player was going home the next day. Despite the fact they knew that was going to be the outcome, they were that upset for her because they knew that she was missing out on the opportunity that she wanted to be a part of. So again, very proud of the group for how they conducted themselves and the genuine love and concern they showed for one another. On the 17th of July, this is what we walked into. It's Main Street in the Olympic Village. It was an amazing venue. These are condominiums, or will be turned into condominiums now that the Olympics are over. It's on the waterfront. It's the most prime real estate you could ever imagine. We were on the 9th floor overlooking the harbor where you saw the Olympic rings that CBC would show whenever they would come online for the Olympics. Spotless, you don't see outdoor garbage cans anywhere in Japan because there is no garbage, there is no graffiti. The place is as clean as you could possibly imagine. And that's their culture and their society. This was not a put on for us. Even on the bus rides, wherever you would go, you saw spotless cities and spotless highways with no litter. This is from the balcony of my room in the Olympic Village. And in this little park you see across the road here, you had teams that would do their warm-ups. So you would see boxing teams, you would see sprinters, you would see people running to make weight who are wrestlers or sports that required weight restrictions. And usually in the evenings around 8 o'clock when the sun went down and it started to cool off, it was just totally populated with athletes down there doing their things to prepare. So we had, one of the best seats in the house in terms of being able to look and see the city of Tokyo, but also at the same time, watch athletes from other countries prepare for their competitions. And this is our first night of training. You got to train it. We played in 2 different Olympic venues, one at Yokohama Stadium, which was in Tokyo, the other one in Fukushima. And so just before we broke training that first night that we were there, the athletes wanted to take a bit of a fun picture. So this is with the Olympic rings and the scoreboard in the background and just the team picture they wanted to take that they could have as a keepsake. And before we left to go over to Tokyo, actually we were in Marion, Illinois, we had created this relationship with a couple of schools in Angjo City where our athletes would actually go online and introduce themselves to schools, the kids would ask questions of the players. And it really became almost like a book buddy type of environment. And we did it for 4 sessions before we left. When we actually went to Angjo City, we couldn't go visit the schools because of COVID, but the kids came to watch us play. And when they came to watch us play, they had created this banner that they had all signed. And we told them, or the players told them, that they would actually take the banner with them to the Olympic Stadium and take a picture of the team with the banner and send it back to the kids. And so this is the banner they created through the sort of the book buddy relationship that we had. And then that banner was actually, the pictures were actually sent back to the school so the kids could see the team in the Olympic Stadium with their banner. This is the bullet train. You've probably heard of the bullet train in Japan. It goes at 200 miles an hour, whatever the case. We took it from Tokyo to Fukushima, which is where we opened to play our games, our first 2 games of the Olympics. And this is Wade Gilbert and of course Scott. And the bullet train is just, it was incredibly fun to be on, but it's just so comfortable. The seats are luxury. You're going at the speed of sound. It's just a really neat experience. And so I'm glad we had the opportunity to actually experience it. And then this is our opening game at Fukushima Stadium against Mexico. They were the first team we played at the games. They were the last team we played at the games. And this is during the national anthem, just before first pitch. We could not go to opening ceremonies. I shouldn't say we couldn't. We could have gone. We opted not to go, as did many of the Canadian teams. So what the Canadian Olympic Committee did was they said, let's have our own opening ceremonies down on the grounds at the same time that the opening ceremonies was taking place at the stadium. So this is the athletes and coaches from all of the different sports and podium gear down on the grounds to sort of commemorate the opening of the games rather than actually going to the stadium. And this is just before that picture I opened up with, where Larissa Franklin was about to land in the crowd. Kaylee Rafter, the catcher, played in 2008, the absolute leader of this team, just an incredible woman, smart, passionate. Danielle Laurie, who's been a household name in women's fast pitch, our pitcher that got the last out. Jen Selling, number 7, the woman that had the champagne bottle, who was our best hitter. And then 2 younger players in Kelsey Harshman and Emma Ensminger, who were 2 young players that started with the team in the last 4 or 5 years and were absolutely instrumental in our success. And so here are my post-Olympic reflections. I think we played as well as we were capable of. We lost 2 1-0 ball games that were heartbreakers, but we were the only other team in the Olympics that took those teams to extra innings and lost 1-0 games. We were prepared as a staff. I was proud of the effort that we put forward. You can always look back on these things and wish you had done something different, tried something different. And I still, to this day, I've got the stats in front of me right now from the Olympics that once a week I look at and think, how could I have helped us score 3 more runs to have played in a gold medal game. And I'll take that to my grave because I'm just wired that way. But when I think about what we accomplished, the time that these women put in, the level of commitment they made, we had 2 women on this team who have children. One has 3, one has 2, and we're talking about them leaving home and trusting their husbands to raise their kids for 4.5 months, which is not an easy thing to do. But to think of the level of sacrifice they made to be part of this group was incredible. And although it's a bronze medal, and we certainly went with intentions of coming home with a gold medal, when I think about what we did and where we got to, and the fact that we were the only softball team that has ever come home with a medal at the Olympic Games, and we were that close to being in a gold medal game, pretty amazing accomplishment for the team. And I'm very proud of them and the staff for what we were able to accomplish. And I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was really awesome. I know I was totally into the story the whole time, which my attention doesn't normally get held for that long. So you did a good job. I have a question for you that I'd like you to address to the group, and then we have had a couple in the chat and one emailed, so I'll give you those in a second. Okay. The first one is just regarding something that I've been asked a few times. We have many of the coaches, and some of the coaches probably that are on tonight, who have had Canada Games delayed. And then we've had the NAG Games, which has now been delayed by 2 years. So you've gone through this experience now of, getting that team through the extra year and getting them to perform at the end. What's your advice to those coaches that are right in the thick of it right now to keep themselves and their athletes going through this extension?
Well, I think you touched on a really important thing, Natasha, when you talk about themselves, because you can't be there for other people if you're not looking after you first. So, and unlike my situation where I was a full-time professional coach and that was my job, I know that the positions these folks are in is that they have careers, they have families, they have other commitments, and they're coaching. So the first thing you have to do is maintain a balance in your life and make sure that your bucket is being filled by the things you need to do to fill it, and not you're not overextending in one area or the other, because it will show up somewhere down the road. The second thing you need to do from a coaching perspective is think about what are fun, interesting things you can do to keep athletes engaged. For us, it was a virtual camp. Let's keep them thinking about softball. Let's get them to critique video. Let's get them to do things that preoccupy their minds, and they're not sitting at home obsessing over not being able to go out and throw a ball, hit a ball, run a mile, do whatever the case. What are those things in your world that you can do to help the athletes feel engaged? And if you're not creative that way, and it's okay if you're not, because I'm not either, who on the staff can? Coaching to me is so much about surrounding yourself with the right people and not feeling like you have to have all the answers, because you don't. What you have to be willing to do is find the answers. So if there's somebody else on the staff that's much better at the game piece of it, or doing, things that make it fun. I mean, we did a amazing race 2 years ago with the athletes when we were in Marion, up on the university property, where there's a lake that's got a 2-mile lap around it, and in each area of the 2 miles there were different activities the athletes could do. And our mental performance coach went up and scamped it out, and then scoped it out, and then decided how we were going to run this amazing race competition. And as coaches, we were just there to kind of follow around and make sure everybody was doing what they should be doing. I wasn't convinced that the players would buy into it. They had a ball. They were like 10-year-olds running around this race lake doing these things and competing with one another. So what are the things that you can do within the confines of your program that engage them, that give them things to look forward to? Do you do sleepovers? I mean, I know that's tough right now with COVID protocols. Do you bring them online to do things? Is there a movie night where everybody can come online and watch a movie together? Are there a trivia contest that you can create within the team? What are some things that you can do with the athletes that bring them together and make them feel close to one another, despite the uncertainty around what's happening? When you can be together and train, are you building in fun as much as you are activity? I know that as a coach, it's sometimes so easy to get the blinders on, and you just think about the time you've lost because of COVID and we're falling behind. But you know what? The rest of the world is in the same boat. And so what are the things you can do to engage them and make it fun and make them want to be there and have a good experience? Because the fact of the matter is there's only one team that's going to win. When it's all said and done, there's only one team that's going to win, and everybody else is trying to get there. So I've always been a firm believer, even at this international level, that number one, I want to develop good people. It's a given they're good ball players or they wouldn't be at this level. I want to develop good people. I want to make sure that they love the game. I want to make sure that when they are in a place to give back to the game, they will, because they'll draw from the experiences they've had as players, and they'll want to give that to some other child, whether it's their own or somebody else's child down the road. So I think about coaching from the perspective of developing people using sport as the medium. And I think if we think about it from that perspective, and what are the activities we can engage them in? What are the things we can do? The other thing that's really important, especially in the time we're living in, is, are you communicating with the parents? Because moms and dads are stressed too. You know, they're stressed around jobs, they're stressed around childcare, they're stressed around a ton of things. Are we making sure that mom and dad are being kept up to speed by you as the head coach as to what you're doing and what's going on, so that if there is uncertainty happening in that household, you're not contributing to it by, are we practicing next week? Are we not? Are we going on this trip? Are we not? Do we have to fundraise? Do we not? I think it's really important to be really clear and make sure your lines of communication are open around things you'd like to do and want to do. And even in a time like now, I look at the oval down on the commons. You know, is it something that you can take your team out and once a week you get together and you walk the commons, or you walk the oval, or you do something outside in the fresh air where you can appropriately social distance? But what are the things you can do to engage them, bring them together, and make them feel like part of a team, even though we can't live our lives the way we traditionally are used to? And I think it's the coaches who find ways around that and bring in other resources to help them do those things that are the ones that long-term are going to have the happiest athletes and probably have the most successful experience leading into NAG or leading into Canada Games.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I think you made a couple really important messages there that I hope everyone caught. And one, you know, coming from an Olympic coach who's just returned with a team that won a medal, the focus on fun, and the fact that, you know, it doesn't matter the level, that needs to be a focus. And then also some of the things you touched on earlier, I think could really be used by those teams going through that extension. Like you spoke about chatting to Ellie, and that can be done by a Canada Games team. Get a great provincial Canada Games athlete back in to talk to the team, and the dress rehearsal piece as well. I think, you know, there's a lot of anxiety that can build around a delay like this. And I loved the idea of the dress rehearsal, and that could totally be done by a Canada Games or a NAG group to kind of talk through what'll happen. So I loved that.
And even with respect, Natasha, to things like, you know, I know for Canada Games, it's going to be in Ontario. If you've been to the venue that you're going to compete in, are there people that you know in Ontario that can go take pictures of those venues? What they look like inside, what they look like outside, like just things that can be put in front of the athletes that start to get them familiar with the environment they're going to. They don't seem like a lot, but if we put ourselves in those situations, going back to experiences in our own lives where there was uncertainty creates anxiety. But if I know what the facility looks like, if I know what the ball field looks like, if I know where the dugouts are, if I know what the fence looks like, when I walk into that park, it's like I've been here before, and it's one less stressor. So even those little things can go a long ways to create comfort, not only for athletes, but for coaches as well.
Totally. Yeah. And our minds are funny. It's like we've been there. So we have a question from a coach regarding the items you added or used to create the positive attitude and culture pieces. How much of it was athlete driven versus driven by your coaching staff?
I think in the beginning, it was driven 90% by myself and the staff, because the athletes didn't know what a good culture looked like. They've come from a number of different experiences, especially those with NCAA backgrounds, where quite honestly, the mission is to win. And coaches aren't concerned about whether they're liked or loved. They're concerned about, can you produce? And so it's not that I don't want them to produce, but I think an athlete that is feeling confident and competent and feels as though whether she succeeds or fails, that I'm going to treat her and respect her and love her the same way, is going to be a better athlete for me and for this team than somebody who's scared to fail, because if they do, they won't play. So I think it's about creating the environment that you expect. So what are the standards that we expect around not talking about teammates behind their back, about not, disrespecting equipment, about what time are we there to train? What are the ground rules about when we're there to train? And so what we did as a staff was we sort of built the framework, and then I would flip it back to them and say, rather than starting at scratch where it can kind of go in 5 different directions and then you spend your time trying to bring it back to where you want it to be, I always believe you start with a framework and then you feed it to them to say, okay, here are the parameters under which good cultures exist. what are some of the other things within this we need to do? And then they start to they populate the branches on the tree for you, because you've already kind of created the expectation. And now they're simply looking at within that expectation, yeah, here are the things we need to be able to do. One of the toughest things for us to do when we're talking about young women to adult women was the difficult conversation, like the calling a teammate out when somebody wasn't working hard in practice or somebody was exhibiting inappropriate behavior. Everybody talks about it, but nobody wants to be the one to actually say it, because nobody wants somebody else to be mad at them. And so getting them to the point where they understood that when you trust somebody and you're part of a team, and at the end of the day, we all respect one another equally, then when you're calling me out on something, the first thing I need to do is analyze what I'm doing, that you would feel like I need to work harder. So the first place I should go with this is me before I turn on you. And so it took us a long time to get to the place where somebody could say something or would say something to somebody else, and it's not personal, and it's not I hate you, and it's all those things, but it's, hey, the effort's not good enough, ratchet it up a little bit. So you create culture by the standards you set and holding them to the standards. And of course, most importantly, as a head coach, you got to model the behavior. You can't ask them to do something you're not doing. You can't ask them to behave in a way that you don't behave, because kids will tell you whatever you want them to tell you, but they're not going to respect you, because they're going to know that, well, he or she says this, but then he or she does that. So I tried very hard to model the behavior I expected, to make sure the staff reinforced it, and then to give the athletes, as they developed and matured, more ownership. But you can do it with younger athletes around what should the rules be? What should you expect? Let's talk about cell phones. Doesn't matter whether you're young or old, that's something that everybody struggles with. We adopted a policy that when we got to the Olympic Games, the cell phones went away. But we had a conversation about it. I didn't just walk in and say, no social media, no cell phones, because I knew there'd be an argument, because people would say, well, we're adults. You don't need to tell us you can't. But we started to talk about, what are we here for? And if we can't put our phones away for 6 or 7 days, with the exception of calling family, and be focused on what we're doing, which is playing the biggest sporting event in the world, then what are we here for? And then it became the athletes. They owned it. Yeah, let's put our phones away. Yeah, we don't need to do this. So, even as a coaching staff, like what is your cell phone policy? But find ways to get the kids involved, because if they own it, they'll police it. If they don't own it and it's you, the coach, imposing it, you're going to have a problem. There's going to be somebody looking to break the rule and others looking to follow whoever broke the rule. So finding ways to give them a voice in things, but shaping it before you turn it over to them.
Thank you for that, Mark. I find this really fun. So we have a coach who's at his daughter's gold medal softball game, and he lost connection and he was pretty upset. So he emailed me his questions, Mark. So good thing it's being recorded. Yeah. So you're going to answer them now and he'll get to hear them later. Yeah. So he had two. One was for the kids. So he said, this is on behalf of the players. What is one piece of advice you would give an aspiring U10 softball player?
I think work hard and have fun.
Sounds
and
perfect.
have fun would be first, and then obviously work hard. And if you learn to love the game, then the rest of it looks after itself.
Yep. I can attest to that. You never stop playing. And the second question was for him. He said he started as a baseball coach. His thing was baseball. So he wanted to know if you recommend a good resource to help with teaching softball pitching mechanics.
I would go to the Camp Pitch program that Softball Canada has developed, and I was part of the co-development of that probably a decade ago now. And like everything, there's always room for improvement. But as far as the understanding of fundamentals and of demonstrating what good fundamentals look like, and how the ball should be thrown and how the ball should be gripped and what body positioning should look like, I think that is as good a resource as any. And the reason I say that is because there's lots of things on the internet, and there's lots of people out there that hang their shingle and call themselves a pitching coach or a pitching instructor, but so little of it is grounded in science. It's grounded in hard, physiological, biomechanical fact. It's this person taught their kid to pitch this way, especially in the United States. Athlete had a little success, so well, that's the way we pitch. When we came together to create the Camp Pitch program, we brought in pitchers from around North America who were world class. And we talked about those common denominators. What are the things that you did that allowed you to be a world-class pitcher? And then Kyla Heltz, who co-chaired it with myself, is a doctor, and a doctor who specialized in sport medicine. We had somebody at the table who then could connect the physiological pieces to what we talked about. And she was a pitcher on the 2008 Olympic team or 2004 Olympic team. So we had people around that table that had pitched at a very high level, somebody that was extremely educated in how the body works, And that's how Can Pitch was developed. So it wasn't something that was thrown together by a group of coaches sitting around a table and telling war stories. It was developed by people who had been world-class and then could have that filtered through the lens of somebody who also was world-class, but is a biomechanical expert that could say, well, then this is what your body was doing. And this is why you were able to do this. So I would suggest that the Can Pitch videos are a good start. And then if you feel like you've progressed beyond that, well, then you can start to seek other instruction. But I think from a foundational piece, I would recommend that still to this day.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mark. You've got lots of nice comments there in the chat. So a lot of people loved it. Fantastic presentation, it said. Loved all the photos and stories. So it sounds like everyone enjoyed it. So
Good.
I just want to thank those that were on the line. Thank you so much for sticking with us. And thank you, Mark, for being here with us. And just before we lose everyone, we do have a heavy October for podium sessions, just how the calendar laid out. So we have New Brunswick is doing a panel of community coaches talking about, why do they coach and what's it like being a community coach in their area. And that's October 13th at 8 p.m. And then we're following that up October 27th at lunchtime. We actually have, it's interesting, Mark, you spoke about Ellie Black. We have Ellie Black's coach, Dave Kikuchi, partnered up with Chad Brooks, who's a local canoe kayak coach. And those two are talking together about their experiences. And that'll be another great conversation similar to Mark's. Chad and Dave had very different experiences at the game. So the two of them will both be sharing their experiences together. So those are, you can check them out online and find them in the locker, and we'll see you next time.